Hey, you're listening to the Brutally Delicious Podcast. I'm Bruce.
And I'm Chris.
And today we've got our new series, Behind the Desk, where we plan on speaking with producers and engineers and anyone behind the glass who's worked on classic albums. And I can't think of a better person to kick off this series than Tom Werman. He's been behind the desk on 1,000,001 albums that I still listen to.
This guy's productions changed my life. From Shout at the Devil, Theater of Pain, We're Not Gonna Take It, Girls. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on.
So, without further ado, let's just jump in and see what we got.
The Brutally Delicious Podcast presents Behind the Desk.
What are we going to talk about?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about the making of Girls.
Well, we could talk about it, but the problem with talking about all these things that they happened 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot of specific information that I can recall. There are general things. For sure. But, if you would ask me a question like, what guitar did Mick use on blah, 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 then there's no way.
Right.
Oh, no, I'm more interested in, like, for instance, on the song Wild Side. Whenever I listen to that song, I'm pretty sure that's not a real bass guitar on there.
Oh, sure it is.
It is?
Sure it is. Oh, everything's real. Everything except, we used a couple of samples at the end.
Yeah.
In the city sounds part, where the gunshots and sirens and sidewalk noises and all that stuff. We didn't use keyboard, bass, or anything like that.
Well, that's
Never.
really interesting to me because the whole persona of the Girls era was a band that was so, to put it mildly, messed up from addiction.
Yeah.
That they could barely play. And that bass line is just so absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
How did you get that out of a guy that was so addicted to heroin like that?
Well, he wasn't, I don't think well, he was actually still like that. I really enjoyed doing that song. I think it's really good. And I didn't like much else on that album.
Really?
You mean the mean the rapid?
Yeah, the 16th notes.
Yeah, that is not Nicky. No, I don't remember, but it's good, isn't it?
Oh, it's so good.
Really is.
But it's so perfect. And I was just like, there's no way that's a real bass. Like, how would they pull that off?
I did something else. He may have played with it, but that sounds like there's a guitar feel to that. Maybe a guitar and a bass, but you're right. It's very it's very even. It's very driving. That's something I did a lot. I like that the insistent kind of freight train thing on the bottom. I honestly can't remember, but. By that time, Nicky was a decent bass player. He wasn't at Shout at the Devil, but that is good. I never really. I can't remember what we did.
That's okay. I was just curious because when I hear that line, it's so driving and it almost seems sequenced. But you said you weren't using keyboards at that time.
Well, we may have started. We may have done that because it really does sound that good. But the other thing is I was we could have taken an hour to do that, and maybe we got 10 good seconds and then looped it or figured out how to do that. That's a possibility.
That's the part he plays live like that, but it doesn't sound anywhere near that good. So.
Right.
Was it difficult, not only with just Motley Crue, but was it difficult pulling out, these best performances with these guys that were so well known and so popular?
Yes, it was difficult. Some are better than others. Like Motley Crue was a little better than Twisted Sister. Cheap Trick was really good. Ted Nugent was just fine.
Right.
And he was very, very together. In fact, I mean, he knew all of the all of the other parts in his head before he came into the studio. I mean, he was a major musical director. But I would say Poison and Twisted Sister were challenging. Poison was very, very willing, cooperative, and Twisted Sister was a little harder to deal with.
Interesting.
But not necessarily in terms of attitude, but in terms of knowledge and hard work. And the Twisted Sister, they didn't know too much. A couple of them didn't know that much about their equipment.
Right.
We had to work hard, and you can hear that their whole musical presentation is pretty basic.
Right. But those were also the times when you had like unlimited studio time, right? And big studios and unlimited budgets, or big budgets.
Big budgets, yes.
Yeah. And you could take the time to kind of drag it out of them, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it took. On Nothing But a Good Time by Poison, there is a guitar solo, and I think, it was like half a day for 30 seconds.
Wow.
Because CeCe kept going back and freebasing.
Oh God.
And it's and then he'd come back and he'd want to wipe it and start again. But I did that digitally. It's the only album I recorded digitally, because I knew there would be a huge number of punch-ins, and corrections. And so I'd just say, play along, and I'll get you in, and then I'll get you out. And there were so many times I pressed record and play. If it had been anything but a digital, we just couldn't have done it. It would have, it's seamless on digital.
Right.
A splice or an edit, a punch in. On analog, you sometimes there's a little dropout, or you can hear it, and
right.
It's much more difficult.
Was that on the old Sony Dash machines?
Well, I don't know what the machine. They were all Studers.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure, but it was the remote that made the difference.
Oh, gotcha.
The remote that the producer would use, or the engineer would use, on the little stand on wheels by the console, and it had really, really sensitive touch, buttons. So if it was like a touch screen. If you wanted to play, to go into record or play or rewind, you just literally put your finger on it. With the analog guys, it was like a clunk.
Yeah.
But I guess your question was more about attitude, focus, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Motley was pretty good when they got to the studio. I didn't have it was hard to get them to the studio.
Right.
But when they did get to the studio, they would work when you asked them to. Vince especially was a real trooper, because he was the most difficult to get a good performance out of, because he just wasn't that great a singer.
Right.
He was a great front man, but he wasn't necessarily that great a vocalist, and he would stand in front of the mic for 3 hours, working on one song.
Oh, wow.
And we'd get, one day we kept a line. That's it. We kept one line.
Wow. Was Nicky pretty involved in the recording of the vocals, or did they just allow you to do that?
Well, in one of the books he allegedly wrote, he said that I was a complete, that I had nothing to do with it, and that he produced all the vocals or something like that, which is 100% bullshit. And I did all the vocals. I did them with all the vocalists all the time on all my records, and I did them in a way that really relieved the vocalist of having to stand there for a very, very long time. I made it easier for as easy as possible for the vocalist to not have to repeat, to keep it fresh for him. And I did it by combining tracks and by combining, lines and words from 3 different tracks. And then I'd record 2 more tracks and I'd make another comp from that. And so I'd, in about 5 performances, I'd get a final vocal track, and then I'd go in for specific corrections and on that track alone. So, you have the guy sing 3 different tracks or performances of the song, and then you say, go take a rest. And you take 30 minutes to combine them all into one. Then you do 2 more, and you do the same thing again. So by the time you've done 6 tracks, and taken the best from each of them and put them all together on one, you've got a pretty good vocal performance.
Did this require you slaving 2 machines together for vocals? Because like 6 tracks is like a lot on analog.
No. Not a problem. No, you would just do 3 tracks, and then you'd combine them to one master track.
Gotcha.
Then you could use the same. You could use, if you put them on track 1, 2, and 3. Then you'd go take bounce everything to track 4, and then you could use 1, 2, and 3 again.
Gotcha.
Then you still had your master on track 4.
So you were working like hell to pull those vocals.
Well, it was very hard with him. On the other end of the spectrum, there was Robin Zander, who was an absolute vocal genius. I mean, it was just laughing time when he got in front of the mic. It'd take him 2 or 3 performances to get a perfect track, and then he'd double it and perfectly, and then he'd harmonize. Wow. I mean, it was superb, and we'd do 3 songs in one afternoon.
And that made your life a whole lot easier.
It was, it was great. Working with Cheap Trick was such a treat, and it was much easier than the others. That's all.
What about drummers? Like when I see Motley Crue play live, Tommy Lee is a monster behind the kit.
Oh, he is. He's the second best drummer I ever worked with. I mean, he is a wonderful drummer. The only one I would put above him is Bunny Carlos because of what he played or what he didn't play.
Oh, as far as kit size?
No, the part.
Oh, gotcha.
He did as little as possible, and he used his fills sparingly and efficiently, and he was just he was a very influential drummer. A lot of people, a lot of drummers that came after him, I can hear stuff that we did in a lot of other drummers that came after him.
That's interesting because he flies below the radar on people's list of drummers.
Oh yeah, probably. I loved him, and he was perfect. He never made a mistake. You never
great.
said, Bunny, we need a better drum track before we can put on the bass. They were great. They were
awesome.
The best. The whole band was, heads above any other band that I ever worked with.
That's great.
In terms of musicianship and performance, and like we did Dream Police in 30 days, start to finish, which for that time was amazing.
Yeah.
And that means mixed, done, mastered, go.
Wow.
So that was good. That's a good album too.
It's a great album.
Those are the best. I think Heaven Tonight and Dream Police are the 2 best productions that I ever did. Then there are some that I think could have been better, but I thought those were great. I was pretty, kind of disappointed that Cheap Trick wasn't bigger, period, than they were. And I thought they should have been a huge band, not, a pretty big band.
Right.
I watched their live show on Access TV. They play concerts on Saturdays or whatever. And they played a live show, and they were so freaking good. It was unbelievable.
It is, and it's much harder. I'm a pop guy. The one common complaint, if there was a complaint, from the band about the record, which they all, they all loved, and and the records sold, and they all got, platinum records. And,
Sure.
But 20 years later, they bitch and moan. And what they say is, it wasn't us. It wasn't hard enough. It was too pop. It was too smooth. It was too perfect. And that's, I'll admit to that. It's who I am. The reason that many of these bands made it was because I took all the pop elements from the songs and featured them instead of just letting them blast away. I mean, Twisted Sister, Dee Snider famously talks shit about me. In his book, he said, I destroyed their record, which has sold about 8 million copies. And he said, I destroyed it. And this record, honestly, delivered their lives to them. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely.
This record just goes on and on. It's a very big seller. It's a very big seller and streamer. It still does very well, and it made Dee a very rich man. And he for some reason he just can't deal with my involvement. He was extremely nice right up till the record was over, and then he just wouldn't talk to me. So I was scratching my head. What happened here? But anyway, I get distracted when I start talking about that. He said he re-recorded the whole album just to prove a point. He said, this is how Twisted Sister should sound. And it sold. It was released. It was released after Stay Hungry, and it was called, I don't know, something like a little play on the words of Stay Hungry. Regardless of what it was, it sold about 25,000 copies.
Right.
And instead of and we're not going to take it as it's like an iconic nursery rhyme song.
Yeah.
But he got really pissed because I said it was kind of basic, and I didn't really want to have it on the album. He said I wouldn't let them record it. No producer has that kind of power.
Right.
To say you can't record that. They hire me, for God's sake.
Right. They're paying your bill.
Yeah, they can fire me. It's
and in the end, I'm thinking they hired you anyway because of your track record of creating that sort of. I mean, the records speak for themselves, and they created that whole sort of genre of music. I think almost that whole So I mean, I think that's why they would hire you anyway, right?
Well, yeah, they were kind of pushed to hire me by Atlantic.
Atlantic, right?
And I think he really resented that because he was he was definitely. I am the boss. So,
right.
He was really tough. The thing that I started to do when I was still at Epic Records, and I started producing by going into the studio with Nugent. By the way, we didn't discuss politics.
That's good.
Really, it's dreadful what happened to Ted in that department. But hey, we actually had fun. It's very difficult for me to justify to my friends that I still talk to them.
Right.
They're aghast. But I have to say, listen, I had a very good relationship with Ted, and very productive and very enjoyable for many years. And I had no idea that he was a fascist. Anyway, what I would do was take bands that in those days, it was just AM and FM. AM was the hits, and FM was the album play. And if a band that I signed, if I wanted to sell a lot of records, you just had to have a hit single. If you got a lot of FM play, you'd sell a few 100,000 albums, and that was good. But if you had a hit single, you could sell 1 million albums, and that was much better. So I saw my job as making hits, and
you did.
Yeah, I did, and at least I'd get them on the radio, and they would have the attention of the music buyers, and then after they had a hit or two, they could kind of do what they wanted. They could be as self-indulgent as they wanted. So I made hits, and that's why I resorted to several power ballads. That's how I got a lot of bands on the radio that wouldn't probably have been on the radio.
Yeah, that was the year that was the decade of power ballads.
And you are the father of probably the biggest power ballad of all time, which is Home Sweet Home.
Home Sweet Home. Well, I think Dream On is the biggest.
Well, Dream On is bigger. Okay.
Yeah.
But Home Sweet Home still holds the record for the longest #1 song on MTV.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I did not know. I didn't know that. That's great.
They actually had to retire it. They had to retire it.
Did you see the MTV documentary?
I didn't know.
It's called I Want My MTV. It's good. It's good. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys were around at that time.
Yeah, I grew up in that time, so that was my heyday. And when we were getting ready to talk to you, I was looking at your discography. I was like, shit, these are like the records of my life.
Right. I love that. Yeah, it's great. It really is. I like that people, live their lives to some of my songs.
I mean, all of it. Yeah, I mean. Really, it's just a list of who's who, and it's phenomenal. So that's great. You've had a great career.
Yeah. It was fun. It was fun, and it was good. And when it ended, it was really. I agreed kind of with the musical change that it was time to go. It was time to get out, because I had already done over 50 albums, and I was burned.
Yeah.
And also, when the kind of music that I did went out of style, it really went out of style, and it went from cool. It went from cool to embarrassing in about 5 years.
Yeah,
pretty quickly, right around between 85 and 90. With the Beastie Boys and Nirvana, I could see the writing on the wall. So it did take me 10 more years to get out, but it was over. And now you look back and rock and roll, the era of rock and roll is over. It was a period.
Yeah.
And I think it ended, right around the turn of the century.
I think so. Right around there, maybe if not before.
Yeah.
It was definitely heading out middle of the 90s, probably.
Right, and it started, I think, in with Elvis. It started in or Bill Haley, around 1954. Mm-hmm. And I was 9 years old then, and I had it was perfect timing, just perfect, Yep. And I started listening to the radio, and I just absorbed completely everything that I heard, and. Then the 60s and 70s were just incredible in terms of creativity and new innovation and new music. Right. And then, then we had, glam and metal.
Yep.
And then it was over. And one of the things that kind of forced me out was that, take a Seattle band, Soundgarden or Pearl Jam, or one of those bands that came from Seattle or had that kind of Seattle vibe. If they had worked with a producer who had worked with Motley Crue, they simply would have lost all their street credibility.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because it was like an embarrassment. It was, oh, come on, those guys. It was absolutely the antithesis of Poison or Motley Crue or Rat or whatever, Winger, all that whole time. So I was definitely not only not in demand, I was like a must to avoid, because I was associated with that, and I never really wanted to be associated with that. I wanted to do the Eagles. I liked pop, country, not country music, but I like pop music, hard power pop, like Cheap Trick.
Right.
I was just much better at that.
What was it like working with Ricky Rocket as a drummer?
Oh, he was great. He was really good. He said, "I know I'm not the best drummer in the world, but I'll work at it." And he really worked at it. He was very good, very focused, a good guy, and gave it his best. Really did. And at one point during rehearsal, he had a real tough time with a specific fill in the middle of a song, and it was kind of a necessary fill. And he had so much trouble with it that I knew Bunny was in town, and I called Bunny and I said, "Could you come down to the rehearsal and work with Ricky? Because he just needs to get over this hump." And Bunny did, and he helped him, and he fixed it all up, and it was
great.
Great,
unbelievable.
But he was he was a very good guy. Drummers generally in every band were the best guys. They were the most agreeable, the most focused, and the least difficult.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, they were good. Some of the others weren't that great. But generally, I don't know. I had a very good time.
And I want to thank you for all of the records that I still listen to. There's tons of music out there, but I still those are some of my go-to records over and over and over again. They're amazing.
Yeah,
so thank you so much for your contributions to music in general.
Oftentimes when I listen to Mick Mars, I think he might be one of the most underrated guitar players of that era. Would I be wrong in thinking that?
Nope, not at all. I've said that a lot of times. Mick was great. He was always prepared. He had, he had a lot of his stuff written. The only thing that I contributed to guitar-wise to Motley Crue records was fills. So, you'd get to the end of a verse, you go into the chorus or whatever. Any transitional fill, I would work with Mick on that. He'd be playing in the control room, and we'd work on a fill, and I'd say, well, we'll try this and try that and try that, and he was extremely cooperative, really good guy, Mick. He's been unhealthy for a long time. I don't know how he's doing now, but he was definitely the guy I related most easily to in that band.
That's interesting.
Maybe because he was older than the others.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how. They all call me Pops.
But his tone is so unique, and his solos are so unique.
Yeah.
He's not a speed demon.
Yeah.
He's not, but he's melodic, and his tone is full, and it's not something like you can't say, oh, it's the guitar and the amp, because it goes across every record he's ever done. He has this sound.
Well, I think there was a definite improvement between Shout and Girls. I like the guitar sound on Girls, Girls, Girls itself, the song, and on Wild Side. He had, I have to say that one of the reasons for that was his guitar tech. He just had a very good guitar tech by that time, and in Shout, that's the Motley Crue fans' favorite album of the three that I did. For me, it was a little muddy, and apparently that's what people liked, and there was a clarity and a brightness to the girls' guitar sound.
Tom, I want to thank you for answering my email. It was hard to track you down, but thank you for doing it. This is in a new series of we're going to try and speak with producers and engineers that worked on, classic records, and we're trying something different. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Sure. It was a lot of fun.
And thank you for contributing to the music that made my life. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure.